Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Lunch Tech in Chat with me and your friend William. My friend, your friends, everyone's friend.
Eh, Yay! We have some
Yeah.
new sounds. Yeah, that's good. It's getting it's getting professional this time.
Makeup, makeup.
Wake up. Hey Andre, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Yeah, good, good. It's starting to get a little bit chilly here, where I'm speaking from, in Melbourne, yeah, which is something that actually we're pretty excited about on this side of the world because we had a very warm summer. So we were looking forward to some relief from that. So it's really nice outside. The trees, we're starting to have like that autumn feeling, and beautiful colored trees all over the city. Temperatures actually been dropping almost like sub tens already in some days. So it's actually getting a little bit more wintry.
Amazing.
Oh,
Here in New
yeah.
Zealand today is 20 degrees, not too bad. So we are between the 19s, 18s to 23, 24. So it's still okay here in Auckland. But yeah, good
Yeah,
to
no,
see you.
actually we're getting lower temperatures than you guys. So
Yeah,
I guess we
en-
don't have any barriers, right? So coming
enjoy
out from
enjoy
the
the weather.
from Antarctica straight into us here, we have absolutely no barrier from the southern
Yeah,
winds. So,
cool. So a lot of cool stuff has been happening, and some crazy shit from Donald Trump as well, which is shaking the whole world. So I think there's some cool stuff for us to talk about. I have been playing a little bit on my spare time with image generation using the 4O model. I think everyone has, generating the Ghibli images and the Simpsons and
mm,
all that cool stuff. I think it's really interesting um, how the new model is working now using diffusion. It's interesting that they not blocking any sort of content or copyright, like they generating images from Ghibli studios without any copyright, so you can just put your image and you say generated as Ghibli. But there are some other cool stuff that you can do, like you can generate images with actual content. So I've been trying to push the
mm,
boundaries on like creating scripts and generating pages of magazines and
mm.
actual kids or children's book with image and sort of conversation and the text at the bottom. It's
Yeah.
pretty cool how it works. It's I think that's the next evolution on image generation that we haven't seen for a while.
So are we essentially talking about kind of going down the manga route where you can generate images and text and start creating some full mangas out of these image, or it's more like kind of like image by image, that you've
Well,
been playing around and what
yeah,
you're
pretty
saying.
much. You generate image by image, but it's very interesting how you can generate the images. So yeah, I have been doing some stuff like generating, like just images or um, images with text or yeah, even yeah, it's just I feel like it's a new stage now. Like for example, I'll give you an example, right? You can now, for example, take a picture of a living room, ask
Hmm.
like remove this couch or remove everything, keep it as a
Yep.
clean living room. It removes everything from the image. And then let's say you
Yep.
go into another shop and you find images of a couch that you like. You can take that image and say, oh, can you add it to my living room? And just add it in a way that it feels realistic. So you can now start visualizing
Yep.
things. That's one of the things. The other
Yeah.
thing is around text. So you can have a lot more text. It still sometimes get like wrong spelling, but you can fix. Um, but yeah, it's just creating this new stage of image generation with good texting and sort of the AI understanding the things that are around that image and allowing
Yeah.
you to do styles, remove, add, knowing people. It's pretty interesting. It's I
Do,
recommend
do, do,
anyone that hasn't played with that to do so.
do you know how from I guess from the back of how the actual model operates, how it's doing that contextualization of the image on its own? Do you kind of like do you have like an idea like technologically how it is? Is it kind of like just essentially kind of like categorizing the different elements within an image, and then essentially kind of like estimating kind of like distances kind of within the image between the different elements, and therefore you can edit different elements like that? Or how does that actually the model actually work from that point of view?
Yeah, so the way that it works is this is a diffusion model. So diffusion is like,
Yeah.
imagine you've got a lot of noise and you trained on that noise, and then as you take the noise on the screen, you start to make sense of that static into something like a more image related. So you're training on the actual diffusion of each image, and that's what's using to generate it. I wrote, it's quite hard to explain, so I put it on my chat GPT. How do I explain in an easy way how the diffusion model works? So the way
Yeah.
that GPT is explaining to me, the diffusion model is kind of like a magic bubble, but backwards. First, the computer pretends to fill a picture with noisy bubbles, like the
Mm-hmm.
whole picture is turning to messy dots and noise, like a static TV. Then, little by little, the computer learned how to pop each of those pixels or bubbles into the right way so a picture appears. So instead of generating the whole images, the same way that X AI has been doing, like it generates Grok AI, sorry, it generates from the top down each line pixel by pixel, but the model can now, with vision, interpret and understand all the context and things in the image. You could do that before. There
Right.
were different ways, like even with AI, like just vision, you could ask context on the image. Microsoft had those things that would identify each of the pieces of the image. But imagine now with vision, understanding the image, understanding the context of the world and how things work.
Mm.
So imagine like you've got a picture on the wall, right? And you say, please remove this picture. So the
Mm.
context of the AI will think, okay, so the picture on behind is a white picture, so I need to carry on as a white picture, or is a pattern or whatever. So
Yeah.
now those diffusions are filling the blanks and identifying the pieces to remove. You have sort of
Yes.
seen something like that when you used AI, for example, on Apple devices, that you can select the specific things and remove from
Yeah.
photos. I know
Yeah.
Android does that as well. It's the
Yeah.
next stage into that. Like instead of you highlighting it, just by talking about what it is, it can
Yeah.
actually identify and make the changes. So yeah, it's pretty cool how it works. I've been
But
doing,
you
yeah, go
but you
for it.
need to be pretty you need to be pretty precise in terms of how you describe those elements in the picture, don't you? Depending on the
Uh,
complexity of the picture, I suppose.
Yeah, depending on the complexity of the picture, you can also sort of, depending when it generates, you can interact with the generation. So you can open the
Mm.
generated image, highlight stuff, and say, "Oh, change this, change that," and it's not going to generate a whole new image. It's just going to make the changes that you asked. So, like
Yeah.
one of the things that I have been playing around was doing infographics. So on
Mm.
infographics, you have a lot of images and text, and then sometimes the spelling is wrong. So you can just say, "Oh, the spelling of this word is mistaken. Can you please fix it?" Instead of regenerating a whole image from zero, it's actually generating
Yeah.
the old image, changing that part of the image. So it's using the
Yeah.
same diffusion that was generated, focusing on that piece to be regenerated. So it's quite
Yeah.
amazing. Like it's really powerful.
Yeah. Because previous image generation kind of like models, they usually had what that problem with text, right? So where you would generate a whole picture and then actually the text would either the spelling would be wrong, or any spelling that was actually on the picture would be wrong, or they would be blurry, or etc., etc. So I assume with this new generation of models, that's correcting some of those flaws as well in the previous models.
Yeah, it's pretty much fixed, which is really cool. And when they released the new model, a couple of days after, I think OpenAI were having around 1 million people signing up per minute or something crazy like that. So like
Yeah.
yeah, so even Sam Altman was saying, can you guys please hold on the image generation because this is starting to melt our GPUs? And they started to create a lot of restrictions on image generation. So on the
Yeah.
beginning, it was really slow to generate images, and then they put limited to the free accounts. So they started creating lots of restrictions just because people were going nuts on it.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So like, yeah, I'm just like recapping a little bit like what you're saying there in terms of like the steps and the process of how it works. So essentially, you have the AI generating all of like the different like um, pixels on the picture, and essentially kind of like creating the picture through a diffusion, and then there's some sort of like overlay, like I'm just putting myself in my own words, overlay of a model that then goes and looks at the picture once it's actually formed and interprets what is in that picture. And is that an appropriate way of saying how that actually kind of like essentially you have like two levels of layers at least there
I,
between a diffusion
well,
model that generates and another one that interprets what is it that is in that picture generated?
so when you prompt it, then there is sort of the brains running on how that image is going to be composed, and then the image just get generated using diffusion, which
Mm.
will start, like you can see when it's generated, like it starts with the whole picture very blurred, and then it starts taking form, and from the top down it will sort of populate each of the lines of the pixels. Once that's generated, you give a second prompt. It will read and analyze the image on what has been generated
Yes.
before applying the next diffusion. So that's sort of how it works.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so that's what I think was talking about in terms of like that overlay, which is essentially that model that reads the image
Yeah, it's sort of
once
a
it's generated,
sequential.
and then, yeah, and then you kind of like trying to break down, even though I know that this is all generated by deep learning and people have trouble sometimes understanding how at the back some of those neural networks are actually generating these types of images, but it's just kind of like architecturally speaking. Yeah, it's very interesting. Okay, now moving on to a bit of like a different topic,
Yeah.
which is fun to my heart. I've been sometimes talking about it during some of our previous discussion. One topic that is not so much about a specific technology, but more about a broad specific topic, which is the topic of education. I recently came across a initiative that I think Anthropic has been preparing for a little while. So Anthropic has set up essentially kind of like a partnerships with a few universities, most of them actually in the U.S., a few big universities, where they're trying to kind of like reverse the whole conversation around AI and how that's being used by students in university as well as researchers, right? Yeah, scholars and academics. And what they said, what they are concerned, I think, about at the end of the day, is that learning within the universities is changing its nature, and it's changing its nature because there are some research that is actually going around. The one, by the way, actually Microsoft has done recently, where they are concerned about critical thinking within people that actually use AI. And the framework that they did, they did that actually a few studies, but one of them actually was around like different steps that is taken in terms of like critical thinking in people. And they essentially they pulled people in kind of like in a couple of groups. People that overuse or use a lot AI for for their work and for their activities, and people that use to some extent, but actually take more like control over the things that actually AI are outputting. And one of the results, like preliminary results of actually that research, is that people have on a spectrum between the trust in what actually AI is doing and a center of focus around themselves and their ability to critically think. And what they're starting to observe is within the spectrum of groups, the ones that are fully trusting AI with everything that they are doing, or most things that they are doing, they are decreasing by some metrics of the framework that they use in terms of their capabilities of critical thinking. And the ones that are putting more of a focus on themselves and their ability for critical thinking by applying different steps in critical thinking, they kind of like they're keeping higher scores of critical thinking as individuals. And it's quite interesting because it's like it's about studies of logic, problem solving, and the like. And so Anthropic took some of this latest research around critical thinking and say like, well, universities still have a role to play, but we don't want the universities to be just on that kind of like, oh, we're going to ban AI, we're going to ban any use of AI because this is bad for students. Why are they paying all of these crazy fees in the first place if all that they are putting is essentially AI-generated papers instead of actually applying their thinking? So Anthropic has reversed that funnel and say, what if we use AI, but in such a way that we enforce aspects of critical thinking in students, and the AI serves more like as a guide for students to enhance the way that they interact with academic knowledge. And therefore, actually, kind of like very interesting, kind of like initiative that the people that used to be actually part of OpenAI, essentially like the founders of Anthropic, are actually ex-OpenAI employees. They're essentially kind of like they're bringing in like tools essentially for specifically designed for academics, and then the AI guides those students instead of giving them answers in terms of how to study the material or how to distill the material to the level that the AI now understands what their level at relative to some, for example, like to an expert. And so, and actually kind of like instead of like giving answers, is more like asking questions to guide the student down the path of utilize those different tools in terms of problem solving and critical thinking, which I found a very interesting initiative because you still have all of the things around, summarization of content, etc., etc., etc. But then it's taking that next step instead of like, here's the answer to think for yourself. Think for yourself, utilize all of the tools and all of that data mining that AI allows within an index of academic content, and then solve problems with it. But solve problems based on your own head, not on me, not on you outsourcing your brain to me, kind of thing. Very interesting initiative. There's just been, I think, just about a week or so this is being launched, but they had already quite a few academic universities that have adopted their tools. Some of the big ones like Penn and some top Ivy League universities starting to embed that into that. And so I'm really excited about what the results are going to be on some sort of like benchmark between universities that essentially have no framework for how AI applies, and students keep either kind of just writing papers with AI with absolutely no human in the loop in a way, versus the universities that are applying a different framework, like say like let's leverage AI, but let's still put in actually the human brain and the human reasoning in the loop, and using AI as an enhancer or as a private tutor, if you will, for those students rather than AI that just actually is the tutor that actually does the homework for them, kind of thing. So it's interesting, and I'm looking forward to some of the results. Maybe seeing kind of like comparative benchmarks between the universities that do something like that and those that choose just not to have any framework around how to use AI and let the students do whatever they want.
I think it's really interesting that I love the concept of AI helping people to be more intelligent. So using AI for you to learn. And if I think about the difference between sort of Anthropic and OpenAI, is that Anthropic, they always have this thing into mind, like it's a research tool, it's an AI tool to enhance the human's capability. Like Anthropic had the first good search, and they've got the ways for people to learn. And I think Anthropic is very focused on what OpenAI should have been, or what the ideation
Mm.
of OpenAI was from the beginning, allowing humans to be more intelligent, like as an additional to human intelligence. And as if you look at
Yeah.
OpenAI and other sort of AI companies, it's more about the replacement of the human to use the human to something else. So it's a very different concept. Like OpenAI focus more and more on that train of let's replace tasks and replace work and automate. While Anthropic is like, yeah, AI is here to um, take your capacity to the next level. So that's really
Yeah.
interesting, and I like the concept, and I still think that the way of learning needs to evolve. Our world is changing. AI is here to stay, and if people don't adapt to this new wave of doing things that is coming, we're just going to stay behind. Like, the worst thing that you want is going to a university where you study for 4 years and nothing that you learned and where you put your energy you're going to use for anything, because AI will just know you and give you the answer. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like
Yeah.
going to a IT course and learning really fucking heavy mathematics when you can use Excel. Like that's it's sort of the same
Mm.
idea. So yeah, I am with you. Like,
Yeah.
learning needs to evolve, but there's a question like, what is the actual future, and are we evolving the right way? I think that's the question that is in my mind.
Yeah, what I'm thinking about it is like it's more like an analogy to almost like sports, how an athlete in a like a professional sports evolves, right? So if you think about if you think like about like an athlete, what makes like a professional athlete be eventually successful or satisfied with his progress? You have a set of things. One is, for example, if you are in a sport that is a competitive sport, one is playing, but the other part that actually makes an athlete complete is, the aspects of it that are mental health based. There are aspects of it that actually are just training and fitness to be well in his body, so actually he can exercise his full potential once he is in the battlefield, right? And I see that in a similar lens. So let's if you go the path, for example, like that OpenAI is going, or at least creating enablement tools, which is essentially mostly about providing the answers and the outputs instead of the humans driving the ship. It's a little bit like an athlete that decides to say, I'm going to be a successful professional athlete, but I will do no fitness training.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that Anthropic is thinking about it is like, let's see, worse comes to worse, and you never become the most successful professional athlete, but you become actually pretty good. You at least you've done all of this fitness training to be ready for something, and at the end of the day, even if the AI completely takes over the world, you will leave academia or whatever as much better fit for something rather than just essentially leaving your brain to be dormant during the 4 years, right? So you're gonna be fitter, you're gonna be healthier, you're gonna be all that kind of stuff, essentially brain muscle instead of like body muscle, and you're gonna actually come out of the university a much more complete human being in whatever life takes you to do after that period in university. And what you're doing in university is essentially kind of like using all of the use studies, problem solving practices, which is essentially fitness training, right? Fitness training for when you get to the battlefield after that period of time. You're ready for the battle. You're ready for something. But if all that you did during the 4 years of university is using AI to completely write everything that you've done without absolutely no critical thinking, you're coming to the other end. If you compare that to a sports athlete, you compare to the other end is a sports athlete that have done absolutely no fitness training during the whole
Yeah,
time.
I agree. I think it's just that question, like, if you are a soldier, right? You're better off learning how to use your guns and the tanks and all the up-to-date technology, or building your body muscles and learning how to fight all the best martial arts. I
Yeah,
think
that's right.
like you need to learn the technology and how to use it and take the best of it. You might need to do some of the other stuff, but the other stuff is not that important anymore. I think that's sort of my view. Like, if you go back in time, you had to fight body with swords and punches and etc. But in nowadays, it's like you fly a drone and you're killing people. Like, you need to get really good at flying a drone and not fighting like a body combat.
100%.
Yeah,
So it's like
so it's
the
like
tool
you
the
need to
tool
make sure
has
that you're
changed. Or
learning how to use the tool in the right way to get the right results. But I'm not saying that keeping the other muscles in your brain is a bad thing. I'm just saying that the focus should be on what you're actually going to use, right?
yeah, and how you can utilize your biggest tool, which is your brain, for solving those problems within the context that is new,
Yeah.
right? If you haven't trained that during all of those years, those formative years, be it school, primary, secondary school, university, if you haven't actually done any of that, by that time your brain, as any muscle, is going to be completely atrophied, right? It's not going to be operating anymore because you haven't trained it. You haven't used it the same way that you would do with your body. If you have like a flex body that you don't train, your body starts falling apart,
Yeah.
right? So, and the brain is no different from that. So if everything that you do is just kind of like, hey, here you go, I'm outsourcing the brain. The brain is now the AI that is doing the whole thing. Then, instead of kind of like going and say like, oh no, the AI is kind of like a tool for an applied tool for that brain to think and to solve harder and harder problems. The same way that, as you mentioned, like your soldier used to learn how to, first, bow and arrows, then swords, then horses, horses with spears, then tanks, now drones. At stage of that evolution, maybe has become a little bit more complex, become more cognitive, what they're doing, and less physical. But
Yeah.
still, the brain was along the way evolving with it. The brain, as our, I guess, our best tool,
Yeah.
hasn't
I think
stopped
I think my question
adapting.
is not like you need to prepare your brain for whatever's coming. But I think the question is, are universities and teachers moving fast enough to understand that this is a new world? If you don't adapt, you might just be wasting your students' time. I think that's sort of my thinking right now. Like, if I think of how I went to university, that wouldn't prepare me for the future that is coming now. And I think as kids are going to university, they need to be prepared for the new future. What's the right way of teaching and getting people there? I don't have the answer. Maybe
Mm.
Anthropic does, but I think that's what people need to start thinking about. Like, the world has changed and we need to adapt. I think that's sort of what I've been trying to say.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I've been reading a few different um, controversial ideas around that topic. Um, so so like I think there are two parts. Some universities are moving down the road, like we have to adapt to whatever the new world is going to be. We Nobody knows what's the end game, if there is such a thing as an end game or is just a continuum. Um, and we have to adapt to it. We have to make sure that potentially our role also changes, and what we actually do to society is not just kind of like, here you go, here's a bunch of material, know it by heart and try to apply it by heart. It's more like about how to critically think about that material to solve particular types of problems, potentially more complex problems, and use your brain to solve some of those complex problems. But other universities are going to say like, well, we need to go full on and saying like, let's not only make some of these studies around as like a training exercises that are theoretical. Let's try to actually set up the university as innovation hubs, as research hubs for applied for applied research, which has always been some pockets of universities and academia was like that. But now a lot of them are thinking we need to set up, because we don't know whether there's going to be such a thing as a traditional, say, job waiting on for those graduates when they actually come out of university. Let's give them the tools so that they create them within. So they create companies. They and kind of like in even like that, like coming back a little bit more like to the investment side of things, they are starting to have like some funds that are effectively interested in that aspect, where so like we are going to actually inject some sort of like venture capital money, or potentially transforming how endowments from universities that actually they work in a way that is going to apply directly to what people have been training within the university to actually create and leverage in raise up startups straight from there, which is essentially kind of, hey, you are going to apply your knowledge and your ability for problem solving in direct creation. So actually you come out of university, you're not looking for a job, you have a company,
Yeah,
right?
that would be
So,
amazing. Imagine that.
and some universities are starting to think along those lines. It's just sometimes it's just about like I get a bit of like a speed with which they can move in that direction depending on the size of the organization, right? But a few of them is like saying, no, let's you use your brain for critically solve problems, and create your own avenues for essentially being hired after university kind of thing.
So, Will, we only have 10 minutes left. We both need to go to work. So, let's talk a little bit about Trump. Let me do a little bit of a transition sound here.
Yeah, sure.
Transitioning. Yeah, and now we are on the Liberation Day in the USA. All right, Liberation Day, tariffs. What is your take on that, my friend?
Yeah, I think the story hasn't finished yet. So we are registering this on Thursday, 10th of April. So by the time this is uploaded, this might be completely obsolete. But anyways, as of today, so things are moving kind of crazy. So we started this week with essentially kind of like the craziest hike in tariffs in the history of the last century, pretty much like since 1930s. There hasn't been such a big hike in the effective tax rate that the US applies to its imports. And for those that actually don't know, keep kind of like hearing different narratives. Imports are effectively paid by the importer rather than the foreign country, right? So when you actually put imports on you put tariffs on your imports, it's actually the importer that is actually covering the cost and therefore, passing that cost onto the consumer. Hence why people are talking about inflation. Anyways, moving on from there. So we started the week with like a big ramp up of that. And then that caused a whole bunch of shakes in both the equity and the
Meltdown in
debt.
the stock market.
And the equities and debt markets, actually, it was both sides, which is kind of like
And
crazy.
crypto.
So,
Crypto was like rock bottom as well.
or everything. I mean,
Yeah.
mostly crypto, kind of like most of crypto actually moves with the equities markets. So
Yeah.
like when the markets actually squeeze, sneezes by 5%, crypto sneezes by, crypto
Yeah.
crashes by 10 or 15%.
100%.
So it's very much kind of like risk off at the beginning of this week. Then, as of the last 24 hours, Trump essentially say, hey, okay, maybe I've gone a little bit too far. So I'll give a pause for any further hikes for the next 90 days to everybody but China. And
But that
essentially
was
was
fake news,
very,
right? Like that was fake
no, no, no,
news. The market
no, no,
reacted, but I heard that was fake news.
no, no. So the story with China is still ongoing.
No, no,
Um,
not the story with China, the 90 days.
so in some country, in the top in the countries where there was actually top tariffs that had been applied, so like 40% and plus, for example, like Vietnam, India, and a few others, you can like say, okay, we're not going to apply the top rate of tariffs. We're going to apply the, essentially kind of like the basic tariffs for now, and then we'll invite them essentially for negotiations, because a few of them have been kind of like coming back and say like we want to renegotiate the bidirectional relationship. So but anyways, but with China, more specifically, the story is a little bit different. So with China, because China is kind of like that, that kid in the schoolyard that is getting a little bit cocky and is not necessarily kind of like up is up for a fight back against the bully in the room. So China said that no, screw you guys. If you apply tariffs to us, we apply tariffs to us. So it's actually escalating a little bit, that trade war, right? And the trade war here, for again those that haven't been completely into the nitty gritty of the trade war. The trade war here is on goods. It's tariffs that apply to goods. We haven't, and I hope we don't go down that path. It wouldn't be good for the United States. A trade war on services. It's only about physical goods actually imported or exported from a country. So, anyways, trying to fix that up, that balance there, but China is still going. So over the last 24 hours, what happened is that the stock market has rebounded within that the news, but there have been huge movements when you look in the data in terms of what has happened to the treasury market, so to the debt markets in the US. We've seen movements in the, well, like 30 basis points, which 0.3% doesn't look like a lot. But when you talk about US treasuries, that's massive. We haven't seen liquidity movements like that pretty much since the GFC. And within a daily period. I used to think that, 10, 15, or even 20%, actually 20 basis points on a move on that was a lot, but 30% in a single day is really a lot. And a lot of that is investors taking their money or their positions out of US treasuries, especially long-dated US treasuries. So that can be troublesome for the US, especially when that comes from foreign governments and foreign central banks taking the money for it. So essentially the message behind it is like, up until now, and in most crises, even the recent one from this week, when you're scared, you fly to safety and you fly to US treasuries. They're still scared about the tariff, but now they're taking money out of treasuries. So this sends a different type of message to what's possibly to come. Where are they going to be allocating that? We are still kind of like to see, but they haven't necessarily reallocated those funds back into the equity markets. So this is the position mostly from the investment bank side of things. Like it's more like the foreign governments that I'm kind of like a little bit
Yeah.
here.
It's interesting because I am starting to see a massive opportunity for China to keep with, the plan that they had of getting more, let's say, involved with the world. That there is a possibility opening of, the big brother that was here helping all the Western world is now playing against us, and China's coming saying, "I'm your friend, let me help you out." So it, I don't fully understand the strategy from Trump and what he's trying to achieve with that. I did see, and I just had a look on my phone now. I did see that there was a bit of a recovery in the market. I don't know if anything has moved or any new news came out or anything that Trump has changed. Do you know? Like, has anything changed in the last hours, day, or whatever?
That's mostly about that pause. It was like invitation for negotiating your tariffs.
And do
So
you think
essentially, kind
that
of like,
was his plan, or do you think there was a bit of a pressure that came towards his way?
I think a lot of that has been about essentially heads, different governments calling the United
And
States.
US businesses, right? Because that's gonna
Yeah,
damage a lot of the US businesses.
100%. A lot of like supply chain having to reorient themselves. That doesn't necessarily mean onshoring. At this point in time, a lot of foreign business, what they are doing, they are just, you know, scrambling to find new markets, which potentially will create some deflationary pressures actually for those markets, because what it means is that actually all of those goods that were being exported into the US and that the US doesn't find that demand, if you have, say, 100% actually tariffs on Chinese goods, which is still a factory of the world, they will have to find actually some markets elsewhere. And if they have too much volume, because they have planned actually the production of those goods for a long time, and they say they have to find all the markets like in the European Union or Australia and so on, but they have too much production, that means that actually there is a
And China
deflationary.
has been doing that already. Like they've been finding lots of countries in Asia and using them as like an extension to get lower tariffs in other territories. So
No,
that's
100%, but they will sell
yeah,
the goods onto those countries, right? So that's
yeah.
the differentiation, because I mean, if you are producing for such a big domestic market like the United States is, because the United States is a consumer market, and if you have to find avenues for your products into other markets, there is an overflow of products, right? So the effect is on the supply demand side of things. If you have too much supply of those products, effectively it means either you keep them in your inventory waiting for some moment, a magical moment for the tariff wars to come down and you can export again in the United States, or you say, no, we have too much production, we have to find markets for it. So what it means is actually those prices actually become cheaper in other jurisdictions, right? So it might be cheaper for, Australians and Australians people in Asia and in the European Union actually to buy Chinese cars, because they have overproduction, and they have to replace with the markets they can no longer penetrate, instead of, reharboring all of their supply chain into the US so that actually they can actually get access to the US market. That takes time. If you're building, a factory, especially on complex goods, it's not overnight that you install a new factory and start actually producing and selling those goods into the US domestic market. It will take some time, but in the meantime, if they have overproduction, they have actually to find markets for those products.
Yeah. So we do need to wrap up, but maybe next time we'll start with the conversation in the US, because I think there's a massive amount of information for us to unpack. Thanks for
Yes.
your time today once again, Will, and thanks for everyone that has been listening to us. Keep going, subscribe to whatever platform you're listening to us, interact with us in the comments, and I'll
Yep.
see you next time, my friend.
Thank you. See you.